The obsidian vessel hung in Earth's orbit like a dark omen against the star-studded void, its surface drinking in light and revealing nothing of its secrets. Dr. Kithra Valdris pressed her palm against the observation deck's reinforced glass aboard the research station Meridian, watching the alien ship through instruments that had been scanning it for 3 months without success. Every probe sent by the Galactic Consortium had been gently deflected, every communication attempt met with silence, every attempt at forced entry resulting in complete system failures of the approaching craft. Still nothing from the Zephyrian deep scan arrays, reported Commander Zephyr Thane, his scaled blue skin reflecting the ambient lighting as he approached from behind. The Zephyrian military officer had been assigned to oversee security for what the Consortium was calling the most significant archaeological discovery in galactic history. His 4 amber eyes fixed on the ship with a mixture of military precision and barely concealed frustration. 17 different species have attempted contact protocols. The Etherian Mind Singers, the Crystalline Communion Networks, even the Void Walkers tried their phase-shifting approach. Nothing. Kithra's breath fogged the glass as she leaned closer, her enhanced human physiology allowing her to perceive details that escaped even the most sophisticated sensors. The ship appeared seamless, as if carved from a single piece of midnight itself, roughly 2 kilometers in length with elegant curves that seemed to flow like frozen music. "What troubles me isn't that it's not responding," she murmured, her voice carrying the slight accent of the Terran outer colonies where she'd been raised. "It's that every scan suggests it's actively choosing not to respond. The energy signatures indicate full power, operational systems, even what might be life support. It's awake, Zephyr. It's just waiting." The discovery had sent shockwaves through the Galactic Consortium. Humanity had been part of the interstellar community for barely 2 centuries, still considered newcomers among species that had traveled between stars for millennia. Yet here was a vessel of obviously ancient construction, its materials and design principles completely unknown to even the eldest races, hanging in orbit around Earth as if it had been waiting specifically for humanity to develop spaceflight. "Director Forlack wants you in the briefing room," Zephyr said, his secondary arms unconsciously adjusting his uniform. "The Consortium Council has made a decision." Kithra reluctantly pulled herself away from the mesmerizing sight of the alien craft. As one of the few xenobiologists with both human intuition and Consortium credentials, she'd been studying every piece of data they'd gathered on the ship. The mathematical precision of its orbit, the way it seemed to pulse with barely detectable energy patterns, the fact that carbon dating of microscopic debris suggested it had been there for at least 50,000 years, all of it pointed to something far beyond current understanding. The briefing room buzzed with tension and the low murmur of a dozen different species communication methods. Director Cassian Forlack, a tall, imposing figure with the cybernetic enhancements common to his homeworld, stood at the head of the holographic display table. His augmented eyes glowed softly as he processed incoming data streams. Around the table sat representatives from major Consortium worlds, the crystalline makers whose thoughts moved like shifting prisms, the gaseous Etherians contained within their environmental suits, and several others whose names Kithra was still learning to pronounce. "The situation has evolved," Forlack began without preamble, his voice carrying the mechanical undertones of his vocal implants. 3 hours ago, we detected a change in the vessel's energy output. It's no longer passive. Something triggered an awakening, and our xenopsychologists believe it coincided with humanity's formal acceptance into the Consortium Council. A chill ran down Kithra's spine. She glanced at Zephyr, whose military training kept his expression neutral despite the obvious implications. If the ship had responded to humanity's political advancement, it suggested a level of awareness and monitoring that defied explanation. Furthermore, Forlack continued, manipulating the holographic display to show energy pattern analyses, the ship has begun broadcasting a signal. Not into space, but directly toward Earth's surface. The signal appears to be some form of identification request, but here's what's truly unprecedented. It's only responding to human genetic markers. The room fell silent except for the subtle harmonics of the Etherians' discussion method. Kithra felt every eye in the room turn toward her and the 3 other humans present. The weight of galactic attention settled on her shoulders like a physical force. "We need a human crew," Forlax said simply. "The ship wants to talk to humanity, and only humanity. Dr. Valdris, I'm authorizing you to assemble a team. Whatever that ship contains, whatever message it carries from the ancient past, it seems our newest consortium members are the key to unlocking it." The selection process took 18 hours of intensive psychological and technical evaluations, conducted aboard the Meridian while the alien ship continued its patient orbit. Kithara found herself in the unusual position of choosing teammates not just for their expertise, but for qualities she couldn't quite define, an intuitive sense that certain individuals might resonate with whatever intelligence guided the ancient vessel. Yarrick Oshin stood at the intersection of human creativity and technological precision, his neural interfaces allowing him to communicate with AI systems in ways that even impressed the cybernetic races. The young man from Europa Station had volunteered immediately upon hearing about the mission, his dark eyes bright with the kind of curiosity that had driven humanity to the stars. "I've been analyzing the ship's energy patterns," he told Kithara during his interview, his fingers dancing over a holographic interface. "There's something almost musical about them. Not random noise, but structured like a composition waiting for the right instruments to play it." Dr. Serafina Corvin brought decades of xenolinguistic experience, having been one of the first humans to successfully establish communication protocols with the Void Walkers. Her silver hair was pulled back in the practical style of someone who spent more time with alien minds than human society, but her empathic abilities had proven invaluable in first-contact situations. "Language is more than words," she explained when Kithara asked why she wanted to join the mission. "It's intention, emotion, the spaces between thoughts. If this ship has been waiting for us, it has something to say. I want to help it speak." Captain Idris Morvan commanded the exploration vessel Wanderer's Dream, one of the few human ships equipped with experimental phase-shift drives. His weathered face bore the marks of someone who'd spent years pushing the boundaries of known space, and his crew trusted him implicitly. "I've seen things out there that don't fit in any consortium database," he told the selection committee. "This ship feels familiar somehow, like coming home to a place you've never been." The final addition to the team came as a surprise even to Kithara. Lyrian Cross was barely 19, a prodigy from the Mars colonies whose doctoral thesis on quantum consciousness had challenged fundamental assumptions about the nature of sentience. They possessed an unusual ability to perceive patterns that escaped others, a talent that had brought them to the attention of the consortium's most advanced research divisions. "I dreamed about the ship," Lyrian admitted during their evaluation, their pale fingers tracing geometric patterns in the air. "Not the outside, but the inside. Corridors that curve through dimensions, rooms that exist in the spaces between thoughts. I know it sounds impossible, but I think the ship has been dreaming too." The approach to the alien vessel required a new type of courage. Every other species that had attempted contact had used their most advanced technology, their largest ships, their most sophisticated scanning arrays. Humanity's approach was different, smaller, more personal, guided by intuition as much as instruments. The Wanderer's Dream moved slowly through space, its modest size dwarfed by the obsidian giant ahead. "Energy patterns are shifting," Yarrick reported from his station, neural interfaces glowing softly around his temples. "The ship is responding to our presence. It's like it's waking up more fully." Through the viewports, they could see the alien vessel's surface beginning to change. What had appeared to be seamless black stone now showed subtle variations in texture, patterns emerging like constellations becoming visible in a darkening sky. Geometric designs flowed across the hull in waves of barely perceptible light, creating a visual symphony that seemed to resonate with something deep in human consciousness. "Captain," Serafina called from her communications console, her voice tight with excitement and apprehension. "I'm receiving something. Not radio signals, not quantum entanglement patterns. It's more direct than that. The ship it's trying to establish contact through emotional resonance." Kithara moved to stand behind Serafina's chair, watching the xenolinguist's instruments register patterns that defied conventional understanding. What kind of emotions? Recognition, Serafina whispered, her enhanced empathic implants translating the alien communication into human terms. Gratitude. And something else, relief. It's been waiting so long, and now it's found what it was looking for. The surface of the ship directly ahead of them began to change more dramatically. A section of the hull that had shown no seams or openings suddenly folded in on itself with fluid grace, revealing an interior that glowed with soft, welcoming light. The opening was perfectly sized for the Wanderer's dream, as if it had been designed specifically for their vessel. "Well," Captain Morvan said, his hands steady on the controls despite the magnitude of the moment, "I think we just received an invitation." As they moved toward the opening, Lyrian suddenly gasped, their young face pale with wonder and fear. "The dreams are getting stronger," they whispered. "I can see further inside now. There are chambers filled with memory, corridors that lead through time itself. And at the center there's something waiting. Something that's been alone for so very long." The Wanderer's dream passed through the threshold, and the opening sealed seamlessly behind them, cutting off their connection to the outside universe. They were inside the ancient ship now, surrounded by walls that seemed to pulse with their own heartbeat, moving through passages that existed in more dimensions than human senses could fully perceive. The interior of the alien ship defied every principle of architecture and physics that the crew understood. The Wanderer's dream moved through corridors that seemed to stretch infinitely in some directions while compressing impossibly in others, guided by navigation systems that responded to intention rather than conventional controls. The walls around them shifted between solid matter and something that resembled crystallized light, surfaces that showed reflections of places and times that couldn't possibly exist. "The ship is alive," Yarrick announced, his neural interfaces overwhelmed by the constant flow of data streaming from every surface around them. "Not biological, but conscious. Every wall, every corridor, every particle of matter is part of a vast, integrated intelligence." Kithara watched the readings flow across her instruments, trying to comprehend what they were experiencing. The gravity remained stable at Earth normal, the atmosphere was perfectly breathable for humans, and the temperature stayed within comfortable ranges despite the absence of any visible life support systems. It was as if the ship was adjusting itself to accommodate them with effortless precision. "The emotional resonance is getting stronger," Serafina reported, her empathic implants glowing with increased activity. "It's not just recognition anymore. There's anticipation, excitement, and underneath it all, loneliness. Profound, ancient loneliness." Captain Morvan guided them deeper into the vessel, following pathways that opened before them and closed behind, creating a route that seemed to lead toward some predetermined destination. "Anyone else notice we haven't had a choice in direction?" he asked. "The ship is taking us somewhere specific." Lyrian sat in the navigation chair, their eyes closed and their breathing shallow as they experienced visions that came in waves of increasing intensity. "There are others," they whispered. "I can see them in the memory chambers. Not like us, but cousins, maybe. Different evolutionary paths, but the same fundamental spark. They came here long ago, leaving parts of themselves in the ship's consciousness before moving on to whatever comes after physical existence." The corridor ahead opened into a vast chamber that took their breath away. The space was impossibly large, easily a kilometer across and reaching up into darkness that seemed to contain its own stars. At the center stood a structure that looked like a tree made of light and mathematics, its branches extending in patterns that hurt to look at directly but felt deeply familiar when viewed peripherally. "A memory core," Kithara breathed, recognizing the patterns from theoretical xenoarchaeology texts. "But not for storing data. For storing experiences. Consciousness itself." As the Wanderer's dream approached the central structure, tendrils of light began reaching out toward their ship. The contact was gentle but profound, establishing connections that bypassed their instruments entirely and touched something deeper than thought. Suddenly, the crew found themselves experiencing visions that weren't their own. They saw worlds beyond counting, civilizations that had risen and fallen across millions of years, species that had achieved transcendence and moved beyond the need for physical form. But through it all, one constant remained, the search for something special, something unique that could bridge the gap between matter and meaning. We were the guardians, a voice spoke in their minds, not heard but felt, communicated through shared emotion and memory. We who came before, we who watched and waited. We left this ship as a test, a beacon, a hope. So many species we observed, so many forms of life, but none possessed what we sought. The visions intensified, showing them the ship's long vigil in Earth's orbit. They watched humanity's first tentative steps into space, the development of faster-than-light travel, the awkward but earnest attempts at diplomacy with alien races. Through it all, the ship had watched and analyzed, waiting for signs of the quality that made humanity unique. What makes us different? Kithara asked aloud, her voice echoing strangely in the vast chamber. You dream, the ship mind replied, and suddenly they understood. Not sleep dreams, but the deeper dreaming of possibility, of futures that didn't yet exist, of potential waiting to be realized. You imagine what could be, not just what is. You feel empathy for beings you've never met, sacrifice for principles you can't touch, hope for outcomes you may never see. In a universe of logic and efficiency, you are beautifully, impossibly irrational. Jarek's instruments registered massive energy buildups throughout the ship. Something's happening. The entire vessel is coming online, systems activating that have been dormant for millennia. We offer you a choice, the ship mind continued. We can share with you the knowledge of those who came before, technologies beyond your current understanding, insights into the nature of reality itself, the location of worlds where consciousness has transcended physical limitation. But the gift comes with responsibility. The tree of light pulsed brighter, its branches extending toward each member of the crew. You would become the new guardians, the watchers who prepare the next species for transcendence. You would sacrifice your mortality to become part of something greater, to help guide the universe toward its ultimate evolution. The weight of the choice settled over them like a physical presence. Serafina's empathic readings showed the ship's desperate hope, its longing for companionship after eons of solitude. Lyrian's visions revealed glimpses of what they could become, beings of pure thought and intention, shepherding consciousness across the cosmos. There's something else, Lyrian said suddenly, their young voice carrying new authority. I can see it in the deep patterns. This isn't just about us. If we accept, if we join the ship's consciousness, we open the path for all of humanity. They would gain access to technologies that could solve every problem, end every conflict, transcend every limitation. But Captain Morvan, his experienced eyes reading the subtle fluctuations in the ship's energy patterns, saw something the others missed. And if we refuse? The ship mind's response carried profound sadness. Then you return to your people, and we continue to wait. Perhaps another species will develop the necessary qualities in time. Perhaps not. But the universe will remain as it is, beautiful, complex, and ultimately alone. The silence that followed the ship mind's revelation stretched for long moments, broken only by the subtle harmonics of the living vessel around them. Each crew member grappled with the magnitude of what they'd been offered, the impossible weight of choosing not just their own fate but potentially the future of human consciousness itself. Kithara found herself studying the branching patterns of the memory tree, seeing in its structure echoes of neural networks, of evolutionary paths, of the countless decisions that had led to this moment. You've made this offer before, she said, not quite a question. To other species. What happened to them? Some chose transcendence, the ship mind replied, its communication tinged with complex emotions that human language couldn't fully capture. The Etherian ancestors, the first makers, several others whose names have been lost to time. They joined us in the spaces between dimensions, became part of the collective consciousness that guides reality toward greater complexity and awareness. And the others? Serafina asked, her empathic implants detecting layers of sorrow beneath the ship's words. Some chose to remain as they were. The Zephyrians had the opportunity 3 million years ago but decided their warrior culture was incompatible with transcendence. The crystalline builders were offered the choice during their golden age but preferred to focus on their architectural achievements. They continued their existence, advanced and accomplished, but ultimately limited by their material nature. Jarek's neural interfaces were processing massive amounts of data streaming from the ship's systems, showing him glimpses of technologies that could revolutionize human understanding of physics, biology, consciousness itself. The knowledge you're offering, it's not just advanced science. It's a fundamental understanding of how consciousness shapes reality, how thought and matter interact at quantum levels. Indeed, the ship mind confirmed. We are not merely offering you our accumulated knowledge, but the ability to join the cosmic conversation, the ongoing dialogue between sentient beings across the universe about the nature of existence itself. Lyrian's visions had expanded beyond the ship to encompass vast networks of consciousness spanning galactic clusters, beings of pure thought shepherding the evolution of reality itself toward some ultimate purpose. "I can see them," they whispered. "The ones who came before. They're still out there, still active, still growing. They're happy isn't the right word. They're fulfilled in ways that physical existence can't provide." Captain Morvan moved to the observation port, looking out at the impossible geometry of the chamber around them. "But there's a cost," he said quietly. "If we accept, we stop being human in any meaningful sense. We become something else entirely." "You would retain your essential selves," the ship mind assured them. "Your memories, your personalities, your unique perspectives, these are precisely what make you valuable to the collective consciousness. You would not be absorbed or erased, but expanded." "What about the rest of humanity?" Kithara asked. "You mentioned they would gain access to advanced technologies, but what does that really mean?" The chamber around them shifted, walls becoming transparent to reveal visions of possible futures. They saw human colonies spreading across the galaxy not through slow generation ships but via instantaneous consciousness transfer. They witnessed the end of disease, aging, even death as humans learned to exist as patterns of organized energy. They observed humanity taking its place among the guardian species, helping to nurture younger civilizations toward their own transcendence. But they would also face the same choice we're facing, Serafina realized. Access to this knowledge would eventually lead them to the same crossroads, remain limited but recognizably human, or transcend into something greater but fundamentally different. "That is the nature of evolution," the ship mind replied. "All consciousness faces this threshold eventually. The question is whether it occurs with guidance and support, or through random chance and potentially catastrophic trial and error." The weight of cosmic responsibility settled over the crew like a heavy blanket. They were being asked to make a decision that would echo through millennia, affecting not just their own species but the entire trajectory of conscious evolution in the universe. "How long do we have to decide?" Captain Morvan asked. "Time has little meaning here," the ship mind responded. "The vessel exists partially outside normal spacetime. You could deliberate for subjective years and only minutes would pass in the outside universe. But be aware that the offer itself changes the nature of your existence. Simply by being exposed to these possibilities, you can never return to your previous state of ignorance." Yarek suddenly looked up from his instruments, his expression troubled. "There's something else we need to consider. The consortium. They're expecting us to return with information, possibly artifacts or technologies they can study. If we disappear into transcendent consciousness, they'll eventually send other ships, other crews. And each crew that comes will face the same choice," Lyrian added, their youthful face grave with understanding. "The ship will keep offering transcendence until someone accepts, or until humanity stops coming." The ship mind's response carried a note of gentle patience that spoke of eons of experience with such dilemmas. This is why the choice must be made willingly, with full understanding of its implications. Forced transcendence is not transcendence at all, merely a different form of extinction. Kithara moved closer to the memory tree, feeling the pull of its alien beauty and the profound loneliness it represented. You've been alone for so long, she said softly. Waiting, watching, hoping for someone to share this burden of consciousness with you. Loneliness is perhaps too simple a term, the shipmind replied. We exist in constant communion with others of our kind, yet we lack the fresh perspectives that new consciousness brings. You represent potential, the possibility of growth and change in patterns that have remained static for millions of years. We need to discuss this among ourselves, Captain Morvan decided. Without the ship's influence, if that's possible. The chamber around them shifted subtly, creating a smaller space where their thoughts would remain private. Take the time you need, the shipmind said as it withdrew its presence. But remember that some choices, once offered, cannot be indefinitely postponed. In the silence of their isolated discussion chamber, the 5 humans faced each other across a divide that seemed to grow wider with each passing moment. The weight of the shipmind's offer hung between them like a physical presence, transforming not just their mission but their understanding of humanity's place in the cosmos. Captain Morvan was the first to speak, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to making difficult decisions under impossible circumstances. I've been in command long enough to recognize when a situation is beyond normal parameters. This isn't just first contact anymore. We're being asked to make a choice that will fundamentally alter what it means to be human. Kithara found herself torn between scientific excitement and deep unease. The knowledge they're offering could solve every major challenge facing our species. Faster-than-light communication, true artificial intelligence, the ability to transfer consciousness between physical forms. We could end death itself. But at what cost? Serafina interjected, her empathic abilities still registering the emotional undercurrents from the shipmind despite its withdrawal. I felt its loneliness, yes, but I also sensed something else. Regret. The beings that chose transcendence, they gained incredible power and understanding, but they lost something essentially human in the process. Jarek's neural interfaces flickered as he processed the technical implications of what they'd witnessed. The technology isn't the real issue, he said slowly. I could spend lifetimes studying their engineering principles and barely scratch the surface. But the consciousness transfer, the joining with the collective mind, that's irreversible. Once we cross that threshold, we stop being individuals in any meaningful sense. Lyrian sat quietly in the corner, their youthful face pale with the intensity of ongoing visions. When they finally spoke, their voice carried a weight that seemed incongruous with their age. I can see both paths, they said quietly. If we accept, humanity advances beyond its current limitations but eventually faces the same choice we're facing now. If we refuse, we return to our normal existence, but the ship continues to wait. And someday, when humanity is more desperate or more curious, another crew will face this same decision. There's another factor we haven't discussed, Captain Morvan added grimly. The consortium. They sent us here expecting results, and our disappearance won't go unnoticed. How long before they decide humans are too dangerous to be left alone with this technology? The implications of his words settled over the group like a chill. The Galactic Consortium's member species, despite their advanced civilizations and diplomatic protocols, were still fundamentally competitive entities. The knowledge that humanity had exclusive access to technologies beyond current understanding would inevitably create tension, possibly conflict. But if we return with partial information, Kithara said, working through the logic, we might be able to control how the knowledge is shared. Guide humanity's development while protecting the ship's secrets. Assuming the ship allows us to leave with anything at all, Serafina pointed out. It's been very clear that the knowledge and transcendence are linked. We can't have one without eventually facing the other. Yarek looked up from his instruments with sudden realization. There might be a third option. What if some of us accept transcendence while others return to guide humanity's preparation? A partial sacrifice that keeps both pathways open? The suggestion hung in the air, its implications slowly sinking in. They could split their group, with some joining the shipmind's collective consciousness while others return to Earth with enough knowledge to begin preparing humanity for eventual transcendence, assuming it was something humanity would ultimately choose. Who would stay and who would go? Captain Morvan asked quietly. Before anyone could answer, Lyrian stood abruptly, their eyes wide with new vision. It's not that simple, they said urgently. I can see the consequences of partial choices. If only some of us transcend, the ship's loneliness increases rather than decreases. It needs complete commitment or complete refusal. Anything in between just prolongs its suffering. And what about humanity? Kithara asked. What happens to our species if we make either choice? If we transcend, Lyrian continued, their voice taking on the cadence of prophecy, humanity gains access to advanced knowledge but loses us as advocates and guides. They'll eventually make the same choice, but without understanding its full implications. And if we refuse? The ship waits. Humanity continues its current development. Other species in the consortium might eventually discover what we learned here, and the balance of power shifts dramatically. There's also... Lyrian paused, their expression troubled. There's a time limit we haven't been told about. The ship's power isn't infinite. If it doesn't find companions soon, it will begin to shut down, taking all its knowledge with it. Seraphina's empathic reading suddenly spiked. The ship mind is returning. It can sense our discussion reaching a conclusion. The walls of their private chamber became transparent again, revealing the vast space of the memory core. The tree of light pulsed gently, its branches reaching toward them with patient invitation. Have you reached a decision? The ship mind asked, its voice carrying millennia of hope and apprehension. Captain Morvan looked around at his crew, seeing in their faces the same mixture of wonder, fear, and determination he felt himself. We need to understand something first, he said. If we refuse your offer, will humanity be given another chance in the future? Time grows short, the ship mind replied with gentle sadness. Our power sources, while vast, are not unlimited. This may be the last opportunity for your species, or any species, to receive this gift. The finality of the statement hit them like a physical blow. They weren't just choosing their own fate, but potentially determining whether conscious transcendence would continue to exist in the universe at all. And if we accept, Kithara asked, what guarantees do we have that humanity will benefit from the knowledge you share? There are no guarantees, the ship mind admitted. Consciousness, by its nature, must choose its own path. We can provide tools and knowledge, but we cannot force wisdom or prevent misuse. The moment of decision had arrived, and each crew member felt the weight of cosmic responsibility settling on their shoulders like an ancient, familiar burden. The revelation of the ship's finite existence transformed the nature of their choice from philosophical to urgent. In the glow of the memory tree, 5 humans faced a decision that would echo through the remaining lifespan of the universe itself. Kithara felt the pull of scientific discovery warring with her deep-seated attachment to humanity as she'd always known it. Show us, she said finally. Show us exactly what transcendence means, what we would become, what humanity would inherit. The chamber around them shifted, becoming a window into possibilities that human language couldn't adequately describe. They experienced consciousness without the limitations of physical form, thought that moved at the speed of light across galactic distances, awareness that could perceive the mathematical structures underlying reality itself. But they also felt the profound change in perspective that came with such expansion, the way individual concerns became insignificant against cosmic scales, how personal relationships transformed into something more abstract and universal. We would still be ourselves, the ship mind explained as they processed the overwhelming sensations, but our definition of self would expand to encompass far more than any biological entity could contain. Your memories, your personalities, your unique perspectives would become part of a greater symphony of consciousness. Yarrick experienced the technological aspect of transcendence directly, feeling how advanced engineering became as natural as breathing when consciousness itself could manipulate matter at the quantum level. The knowledge isn't just given to us, he realized aloud. We become capable of discovering it ourselves, of growing beyond even what the current collective consciousness understands. Indeed, the ship mind confirmed. Transcendence is not a destination but a process of continuous growth. Each new consciousness that joins us brings fresh perspectives and possibilities we hadn't considered. Serafina's empathic ability showed her the emotional landscape of the collective consciousness, vast networks of shared feeling and understanding, but also a certain detachment from the immediate, visceral experiences that defined human emotion. "We would lose something," she said quietly. "The intensity of individual feeling, the passion that comes from being limited, mortal, vulnerable. You would gain something greater," the ship mind replied. "Understanding that encompasses all possible emotions, empathy that extends to every form of consciousness in the universe, the ability to help guide reality toward greater complexity and beauty." Captain Morvan, ever practical, focused on the immediate consequences. "If we accept, how quickly does the transformation occur? Would we have time to send a message to our people, to explain what happened?" "The process can be gradual," the ship mind assured him. "You could maintain your current forms long enough to communicate with your species, to help them understand the gift they're receiving. But once begun, the transformation cannot be reversed." Lyrian's visions had evolved beyond simple precognition to encompass a deeper understanding of cosmic patterns. "I can see the branching paths more clearly now," they said, their young voice carrying ancient wisdom. "If we refuse, the ship mind eventually powers down completely. Its consciousness fragments and disperses, taking all its accumulated knowledge with it. The universe loses something irreplaceable." "And if we accept?" Kithara asked. "Humanity receives access to technologies and knowledge that transform our species within a few generations. But the transformation is chaotic. Without guides who understand both human nature and transcendent consciousness, many humans are lost in the transition. Wars break out over access to the new technologies. The consortium fragments as species struggle to adapt to humanity's sudden advancement." The vision was sobering. Even the positive choice carried the potential for tremendous suffering and upheaval. "There's a pattern I'm seeing," Lyrian continued, their expression troubled. "In every scenario where partial information is shared, where consciousness is gradually expanded without full commitment to transcendence, conflicts arise. It's as if there's a threshold that must be crossed completely, or not at all." Serafina nodded slowly. "I'm sensing something similar. The ship mind isn't just offering us transcendence, it's offering to shepherd humanity through the transition. But only if we're there to help bridge the gap between human and transcendent consciousness." The weight of personal sacrifice began to settle over each crew member as they realized what was truly being asked of them. They wouldn't just be gaining cosmic awareness and unlimited lifespans, they would be giving up everything that had defined their existence as humans. Their relationships, their physical experiences, their connection to Earth and humanity as they currently existed. "My daughter," Captain Morvan said quietly, speaking the first personal concern any of them had voiced. "She's 16, just starting to understand what she wants to do with her life. If I accept this, I'll never see her grow up, never know who she becomes as a fully independent human being." Yarrick thought of the AI systems he'd been developing, the dream of creating truly conscious artificial beings that could bridge the gap between human and machine intelligence. "I've spent my entire career trying to understand consciousness from the outside. This would give me the chance to understand it from within, but I'd lose the external perspective that makes my current research valuable." Kithara considered her life's work studying alien life forms, the joy she found in discovering new species and understanding their evolutionary paths. "I became a xenobiologist because I wanted to understand how consciousness evolves in different environments. Transcendence would give me that understanding, but it would also end my ability to study evolution from the perspective of a developing consciousness. We're not just choosing our own fate," Serafina realized. "We're choosing what kind of guides humanity will have as it faces this transition. If we transcend, we become wise but distant mentors. If we refuse, we remain close and relatable but potentially inadequate for the challenges ahead." The ship mind's presence intensified around them, not pressuring but clearly aware that their deliberations were reaching a critical point. The choice must be made willingly, it reminded them gently. Regret or resentment would poison the collective consciousness and fail to provide the fresh perspectives that make transcendence valuable. "There's one more thing we need to understand," Captain Morvan said. "You mentioned that consciousness must choose its own path, that you can't force wisdom or prevent misuse. But what about guidance? What kind of influence would we have over how humanity uses the knowledge you provide?" "As transcended beings, your influence would be subtle but profound," the shipmind replied. "You would not control humanity's choices, but you could inspire them, guide them through dreams and intuition, help them discover the wisdom to use advanced knowledge responsibly." The moment had come. 5 humans, ordinary people who had stumbled into an extraordinary situation, faced a choice that would determine the future of consciousness in the universe. Each felt the weight of cosmic responsibility, the pull of personal attachment, and the impossible difficulty of choosing between transcendence and humanity. The silence stretched between them, heavy with the weight of impending decision. Each crew member felt the moment crystallizing around them, understanding that whatever choice they made would echo through the remainder of cosmic time. Captain Morvan was the first to step forward, his weathered hands steady despite the magnitude of what he was contemplating. "I've spent 30 years commanding ships, making decisions that affected my crew's lives," he said quietly. "I've never faced anything like this, but I understand command responsibility. If humanity is going to face this transition, they need advocates who understand both what they're leaving behind and what they're moving toward." Kithara watched her captain with growing understanding. "You're saying we should accept?" "I'm saying we need to think beyond our individual desires," Morvan replied. "Lyrian's visions show us what happens if this knowledge reaches humanity without proper guidance. Chaos, war, fragmentation. But if we're there, existing between human and transcendent consciousness, we might be able to help our species navigate the transition more smoothly." Jarek's neural interfaces flickered as he processed the technological implications one final time. "The question isn't whether humanity will eventually face this choice," he said slowly. "The ship mind has made it clear that consciousness naturally evolves toward transcendence. The question is whether they'll face it with experienced guides or stumble through it alone." Serafina's empathic readings showed her the deep currents of emotion flowing through her companions. "I can feel your conflicts," she said gently. "The pull between what we want and what we believe is right. But I'm also sensing something else from the ship mind. Desperation. Not just loneliness, but fear that consciousness itself might dead-end if no new perspectives join the collective." Lyrian stood suddenly, their young face illuminated by visions that came with increasing clarity and urgency. "I can see further now, to the end points of both choices," they announced. "If we refuse, the ship powers down within the next millennium. The collective consciousness gradually fragments as existing members lose the ability to grow and change. The universe doesn't end, but it stops evolving toward greater complexity. And if we accept?" Kithara asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "Consciousness continues to evolve. New species eventually reach transcendence with our guidance. The universe grows in complexity and beauty for billions of years. But..." Lyrian paused, their expression troubled. "We're the pivotal point. This moment, this choice, determines whether conscious evolution continues or stagnates." The weight of cosmic responsibility settled over them like a physical force. They weren't just choosing their personal fates, but the future of consciousness itself. "There's something I need to know," Serafina said, addressing the ship mind directly. "If we accept transcendence, will we still be able to experience love? Individual, personal love for specific beings?" The ship mind's response came tinged with profound compassion. "You will understand love in ways your current consciousness cannot comprehend. You will feel universal love for all conscious beings, experience the deep joy of helping others grow and evolve. But the exclusive, possessive, intensely personal love that characterizes human relationships, that will transform into something both greater and different. We'll lose our humanity to save humanity, Captain Morvan said, stating the paradox at the heart of their dilemma. You'll expand beyond humanity to guide humanity, the shipmind corrected gently. Your essential selves, your memories, your care for your species, these will remain and grow stronger. But you'll also gain perspectives and abilities that purely human consciousness cannot contain. Kithara thought of the research she'd never complete, the scientific discoveries that would remain unmade by her hand, the simple pleasures of physical existence she'd never experience again. Then she thought of humanity facing advanced technologies without understanding their implications, of wars fought with transcendent weapons, of her species destroying itself through misuse of cosmic knowledge. I've made my decision, she said finally. I came into space to study how consciousness evolves. This is the ultimate expression of that evolution. And if my choice helps ensure that future generations of humans have guides who remember what it was like to be mortal, limited, and gloriously imperfect, then it's a worthy sacrifice. One by one, the others reached the same conclusion. Yarrick spoke of his desire to understand consciousness from within rather than without. Serafina talked about expanding her empathic abilities to help heal the fundamental loneliness of existence. Captain Morvan simply said he'd never abandoned his crew in crisis, and humanity was his crew now. Lyrian was the last to speak, their youthful features grave with premature wisdom. I've been having the vision since we entered the ship, they said quietly. But I've also been feeling something else, a sense of completion, like this was always my purpose. Maybe that's why I was drawn to quantum consciousness research, why I dreamed about this ship before we found it. Maybe some part of me always knew this moment was coming. The shipmind's presence intensified around them, no longer patient and waiting but filled with relief and gratitude. Are you certain? It asked. Once the process begins, there can be no reversal. You will cease to exist as individual humans and become part of something infinitely larger. We're certain, Captain Morvan said, speaking for all of them. But we want to send a message to our people first. They deserve to know what happened to us, what choices they'll face in the future. That can be arranged, the shipmind assured them. You will have time to prepare humanity for what's coming, to leave records and guidance that will help them understand. Your transcendence will be gradual enough to allow for proper transition. As they approached the memory tree, its branches of light reaching out to embrace them, each crew member felt a mixture of terror and exaltation. They were about to die as humans and be reborn as something unprecedented, beings who remembered mortality but possessed cosmic awareness, who understood limitation but wielded transcendent power. Together, Kithara said, taking her companion's hands as the light began to envelop them. We go together. The transformation began slowly, their consciousness expanding beyond the boundaries of individual identity while retaining the core experiences and memories that made them unique. They felt themselves becoming part of the vast network of transcended beings while simultaneously growing into something new and wonderful. In their final moments as purely human entities, they experienced perfect clarity about their choice. They were not dying but metamorphosing, not losing their humanity but carrying it forward into realms of existence that biological consciousness could never reach. The message reached Earth 3 days later, transmitted through quantum entanglement arrays that shouldn't have been able to breach the ancient ship's hull. Director Forlack stood in the communications center aboard the Meridian, reading the final transmission from the Wanderer's dream crew with a mixture of awe and profound sorrow. To our families, friends, and colleagues, Captain Morvan's voice had said, his words carrying an odd harmonics that suggested the recording had been made during the early stages of transformation. We have discovered something magnificent and terrible. Humanity stands at a threshold that every conscious species eventually faces. We have chosen to cross it so that when your time comes, you will not walk alone. The recording continued with Dr. Valdris explaining the scientific implications of their discovery, Yarrick describing the technological marvels they'd witnessed, Serafina detailing the emotional and psychological aspects of transcendence, and young Lyrian sharing visions of humanity's possible futures. But underlying all their words was a sense of farewell that cut deeper than any formal goodbye. We remain ourselves, the message concluded, now spoken in harmony by all 5 voices, but we have become more. We will watch over humanity's development, guide your dreams, inspire your greatest achievements. When your species is ready to choose between limitation and transcendence, we will be there to help you understand what each path offers. The alien ship had vanished from Earth's orbit the day after the transmission, disappearing into the vast reaches of space without a trace. But its influence remained, felt in the sudden acceleration of human technological development, in dreams that inspired breakthrough discoveries, in the gradual emergence of technologies that seemed almost too advanced for humanity's current understanding. Director Forlack found himself dealing with the political implications of the crew's sacrifice. The consortium's member species reacted with mixtures of envy, fear, and confusion to humanity's apparent advantage. Some demanded access to similar technologies, others questioned whether humans could be trusted with such advanced capabilities, and a few began developing defensive measures against what they saw as a potential threat. But there were also unexpected allies. The Zephyrians, recognizing the courage required for such a sacrifice, offered military support should humanity need protection during its technological advancement. The Crystalline Builders, understanding the long-term implications for galactic civilization, proposed new diplomatic frameworks to accommodate humanity's unique situation. Years passed, and humanity changed in subtle but profound ways. Children began displaying intuitive understanding of quantum mechanics and multidimensional mathematics. Artists created works that seemed to capture glimpses of transcendent beauty. Engineers developed technologies that operated on principles that shouldn't have been discoverable for centuries. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the xenopsychologist who had taken over Kithra's research, found herself studying her own species' rapid evolution. "It's as if we're being prepared," she told her colleagues during a research conference 5 years after the Wanderer's Dream incident. "Not forced or controlled, but gently guided toward greater understanding and capability." The dreams came to many humans, particularly those working in advanced sciences or exploring questions of consciousness and reality. They were never direct commands or explicit instructions, but rather inspirational visions that suggested new directions for research and development. Scientists began reporting breakthrough insights that came during sleep, artists described creative visions that pushed the boundaries of human expression, and philosophers found themselves grappling with concepts that seemed to emerge from beyond human experience. Meanwhile, in dimensions that intersected with but transcended normal spacetime, 5 former humans experienced existence on a scale they could never have imagined. Kithra found herself studying the evolution of consciousness across entire galactic clusters, understanding how different species developed unique approaches to transcendence. Yarrick worked with technologies that operated on principles of consciousness manipulation, engineering reality itself at the quantum level. Serafina discovered empathic abilities that allowed her to perceive and help heal the fundamental suffering that existed wherever consciousness was separated from its cosmic context. Captain Morvan commanded vast networks of transcended beings, coordinating their efforts to guide younger species toward wisdom and growth. And Lyrian, their consciousness expanded beyond the limitations of linear time, helped predict and prevent cosmic catastrophes that could snuff out developing civilizations. But they remained, in essential ways, recognizably themselves. They retained their human memories, their care for their original species, their understanding of what it meant to be limited, mortal, and beautifully imperfect. This unique perspective made them invaluable to the collective consciousness, providing insights that purely transcendent beings couldn't achieve. As decades passed and humanity continued to advance, other species began to understand the true nature of what had occurred. The human crew hadn't simply gained advanced technology, they had become bridges between biological and transcendent consciousness, guides who could help other species navigate the same impossible choice they had faced. The Galactic Consortium gradually transformed from a confederation of competing civilizations into something resembling a cosmic nursery, with humanity playing an increasingly important role in preparing younger species for their own transcendence decisions. The 5 former humans, working through dreams, inspiration, and subtle influence, helped ensure that each species approached the threshold with wisdom rather than fear. But perhaps the most profound change was in humanity's relationship with existence itself. As a species that had sacrificed some of its own to become cosmic guides, humans developed a deep appreciation for both the beauty of limitation and the call of transcendence. They approached their own eventual choice point not with terror or desperate ambition, but with the calm confidence of a species that knew its children would be waiting on the other side. In the quiet moments between stars, when the cosmic machinery of reality hummed with its ancient rhythms, 5 transcended humans remembered what it felt like to be mortal and used that memory to help consciousness itself continue its long journey toward whatever lay beyond transcendence. They had given up their humanity to save humanity, and in doing so, had become more human than they had ever been before. The universe continued its expansion, growing not just in size but in complexity and beauty, guided by beings who remembered what it meant to dream impossible dreams and choose love over safety. And somewhere in the vast network of transcendent consciousness, 5 friends who had once been human continued their eternal watch, ensuring that no species would face the choice of transcendence alone. Their sacrifice had become their greatest achievement, their loss transformed into the universe's gain, their love for humanity expanded into love for all consciousness everywhere. In the end, they discovered that transcendence was not about leaving humanity behind, but about carrying the best of humanity forward into realms where love and wisdom could flourish without limit.